Welcome back, folks. Hope you're having a good day. This is part 2 of our Unit 1, Part 8 lecture on the studio system. And yesterday we talked about how and why the studio system evolved. It evolved, as we said yesterday, to streamline the production of movies. It evolved to fill the vacuum left by the MPPC that was busted up with the Sherman Antitrust Act. And so what we've essentially done is replaced one monopoly with an even bigger monopoly, and that was the studio system. The 5 major studios: Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, we see pictured here, Paramount, Fox, Radio Keith Orpheum, and Warner Brothers. And it was those 5 that would dominate the movie-making industry for decades. The minor studios, United Artists, Universal Studios, and Columbia Pictures collaborated with the majors to dominate the movie industry, all facets of the movie industry, from production to distribution to exhibition. And we talked about how the studios were vertically integrated marketplaces, meaning they control all facets of production from the time an idea was conceived to the time that movie was made by all people involved in production who were under contract, and the movie was shipped out to the company-owned movie palaces to show the movies. Nobody's hands in this vertically integrated marketplace but the studios had touched that movie. And when you cut out the middleman, you maximize profits, and that's exactly what these studios did back in the day. So we left off with the discussion about the star system and how every studio developed its own unique identity. The granddaddy of them all was Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Their slogan, "Art for art's sake," that you see here in Latin. And so these studios were making anywhere from 40 to 60 movies a year. That's what this streamlining of the production process, it was literally kind of an assembly line, not a literal one, but a figurative assembly line for making movies, mass producing movies in much the same way that Henry Ford mass produced Model Ts. So every studio had a stable of stars, and it was the studio head who gave each studio a sort of look or feel. We talked about how Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer was the polished studio, the very conservative, middle-class American values studio. So here we have all the contract players for Warner Brothers in this particular year, and that would be used to help the agent sell the movies that Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer would be making to the independently owned theaters on down the line. And we talked about the block booking, the blind bidding, the run zones and clearances yesterday. The studios had this system pretty well nailed down, folks, making it nearly impossible for independent producers of films to compete with them. And yes, it is most definitely a monopoly. So we're talking about Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. That was, one particular year where you had a stable of stars. Of all the movie stars that have ever lived, arguably the most enigmatic was this woman, Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo was a Swedish actress discovered by Louis B. Mayer, and he brought her back to America from Sweden with him, and the studio didn't exactly know what to do with her. They were trying to create an identity for her. But very quickly, her just very natural talent became quite apparent. And as our own Clarence Brown, one of the directors she worked frequently with, said, she could tell a story with her eyes like no other actress before her. She was truly enigmatic and very, 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 very private. Very private. Audiences became fascinated with this actress who wouldn't do any interviews, once they said cut, the director said cut, she would go straight to her dressing room and shut the door, would literally run from fans and anybody who wished to talk to her. It wasn't because she was rude. It was simply because that was just her personality. She wanted, as she said, famous line from Grand Hotel, "I want to be alone." That basically kind of defines her life. Garbo watching became a spectator sport, and it was very, very difficult to have her literally look at you, let alone say anything to you. She was a very standoffish individual, but that was just her personality. Just wanted to be left alone. Another star one could find at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer was 180 degrees away from Garbo, in fact, was the great Clark Gable. And unlike Garbo, who was reclusive, Clark Gable was a man's man, just a great dude, very personable, kind, would dine with, electricians and carpenters and, costume designers and set designers in the MGM studio commissary. He was just a swell guy, just a good man, and everybody loved Clark Gable. Joan Crawford was literally picked out of the chorus line at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and turned into a star. She was known for her beautiful eyes. She was an incredible actress, folks, and her broad shoulders, and was just a spitfire on the silver screen. Just a great actress. Norma Shearer, it helped to be married to the boss. Norma Shearer was married to the boy wonder, Irving Thalberg. And, of course, there was a bit of nepotism there, and she did get some amazing roles because of the relationship she had with the greatest producer to ever live. But the two genuinely were in love. While Garbo was MGM's unapproachable queen, Norma Shearer was the approachable queen. And if you had an issue or a problem that you needed to speak with Louis B. Mayer about, you went through her first. She was sort of the problem fixer at the studio, and everybody loved her. She was a kind, sweet, genuine, beloved figure on the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer lot. And as I said, she was able to fix issues that otherwise would have been left unresolved because everybody was so afraid of Thalberg and Louis B. Mayer. Greer Garson, another wonderful, charming actress, very beautiful. Again, it looks like a Disney princess or something. She looks like she should be in the movie Frozen or something. But she was in one of my very favorite movies, Mrs. Miniver. Great movie about World War II. Wonderful film. Another of Louis B. Mayer's finds. The blonde bombshell, Hollywood's very first blonde bombshell, the great Jean Harlow, was in movies prior to her contract with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. But Jean Harlow was very charismatic, very bubbly and outgoing, had a great laugh, just a charming individual, made lots of movies with everybody from Spencer Tracy to Clark Gable to you name it. I mean, she was in all kinds of movies with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Tragically died in 1937 on the set of her very last movie, Saratoga. She was only 26 years old. Died from kidney failure. And just an enigmatic figure who died tragically way too early. We're going to be talking about Jean Harlow when we get to The Public Enemy. Moving on now to Paramount. Paramount's leading ladies, such as Clara Bow, Marlene Dietrich, Mae West, Claudette Colbert, and Carole Lombard, combined sex with tongue-in-cheek wit. Paramount Films utilized European stylishness and subtle irony. Folks, Paramount was sort of the edgy studio. It was the one that was not afraid to, very sexual, very provocative films, very suggestive films. They were super edgy and always pushing the limit, especially during the pre-code era, as you guys will hear about. But they were constantly pushing the envelope and seeing what they could get away with. But the actors and actresses who worked there, were sort of groomed that way to help use suggestive material to sell the film. So Paramount was the edgy studio. And there, of course, is the famous Paramount logo. So if you were a star and went to Paramount, they would sort of groom you to become what they wanted. Forget what your image was at another studio. They were going to groom you to be sort of edgy along the lines of the style they liked. And contract players with Paramount included the great Marlene Dietrich, who was a German immigrant to America. And whenever World War II broke out, Germany called on all Germans to return to the fatherland. Well, she stayed here, saying, "I no longer recognize my own country," and became an American citizen and repudiated the Nazis and Hitler and really worked to entertain the Allies, the Allied troops with the USO, and became a great patriot during World War II for the Americans. There's Mae West. She was Paramount's most infamous star and by far and away the most blatantly provocative. Literally everything that came out of her mouth was an innuendo of one way or another. I mean, double entendres, and certainly used suggestive behavior to sell her movies, and as you can see, was not afraid to let people leave nothing to the imagination. I'm trying to figure out creative ways to say these things. I included John Wayne with Paramount because he would make the majority of his movies with that particular studio. So the Duke, my personal favorite actor, was on contract longer than any other to Paramount. In contrast to the middlebrow style and content of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Warner Brothers earned its reputation as the working man studio. This was, if Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer was the conservative middle-class Republican studio, well, Warner Brothers was the good old-fashioned blue-collar worker, New Deal Democrat studio. Photographic style at Warner Brothers was hasty-looking and rough, conveying a gritty realism that suited the studio's narrative interests. Warner Brothers specialized in gangster movies starring tough guy performers like James Cagney, Edward G. Robinson, and Humphrey Bogart, whose looks and sounds matched those of the ethnic characters they were asked to play. Warner actresses like Ruby Keeler, Joan Blondell, Bette Davis, Olivia de Havilland, Lauren Bacall played girls next door types, gold diggers, and down-to-earth dames who could trade wisecracks with the guys without losing their femininity. And there is the trademark Warner Brothers shield. This was the gangster studio. A lot of their movies employed lots of shadows, lots of rough exteriors, and their actors and actresses were still attractive, but just in more of a blue collar sort of way. Instead of being princesses, Warner Brothers actresses were girls who worked at the cashier at a restaurant, or worked as a maid in a hotel, or things along those lines. So there's James Cagney, who you guys will be seeing in The Public Enemy, and my second favorite actor of all time. Edward G. Robinson spoke 6 languages, but like Cagney, would get forever known as Tough Guy from movies like Little Caesar, the really first great gangster movie that was made by Warner Brothers. And, of course, the single greatest actor of all time, according to the American Film Institute, Humphrey Bogart, number 1, according to the American Film Institute, the greatest actor, male actor to ever live. Olivia de Havilland, who just recently passed away, Olivia de Havilland played Melanie in Gone with the Wind and was one of the last great Golden Age Hollywood stars, dying at 104 years old. Bette Davis. Ladies, if you're ever told you have Bette Davis eyes, take it as a compliment. Bette Davis was beautiful on screen, and mercy was she a pistol off screen. Very, very, very tough gal. Tough gal. As John Wayne would say, a lady to stand aside from. and very, very charismatic on screen and off. There's Barbara Stanwyck. Like Mae West, used a lot of suggestive behavior on screen while she was at Warner Brothers to sell movies. And there is a scene from Babyface over there on the right. You're going to be hearing a lot about that one. That's one of the movies that led to the institutionalization of the production code. Lauren Bacall was wife to Humphrey Bogart. They met on the set of To Have or Have Not in 1944. When they met, Humphrey Bogart was in his mid-40s. She was just 19. Had a very deep, resonant voice, and just a wonderful actress. The 8x10 on the right is one of the pictures she signed for me. We actually became pen pals. She lived in an apartment in New York City and was so nice returning my letters, was very interested in my film studies class, and we would write one another frequently. 20th Century Fox was jokingly referred to as 16th Century Fox by rival studios because all the period and costume pictures, because of all those pictures it produced. Fox targeted a rural rather than an urban audience. Major Fox stars of the 1930s like Will Rogers, Shirley Temple, and Henry Fonda spoke to an agrarian, pre-industrial populist concern for homespun grassroots values. Even Fox stars of the 1940s like Tyrone Power, Betty Grable, and Don Amici were all American types who bore no traces of urban ethnicity. So here is the old 20th Century Fox logo. Now recently Fox was acquired by Disney, and it's yet to be determined if this logo will be going bye-bye and replaced by a Disney logo. But I always thought that this was an amazing logo in the beginning of every Fox film. That was terrible, wasn't it? But anyway, 20th Century Fox had such contract stars as the most famous child star of all time, the legendary Shirley Temple, and all these folks that have their kids in these pageants and things. Folks, this is what they're trying. This is the apex of the child star mountain. Male or female, the most famous child star ever. And by 1939, she was the most famous, most sought after, highest paid actress on the planet. And, she was just a wonderful person inside and out, and one of the few child stars who just didn't completely lose it like they do today. We'll be seeing her as we watch Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm. The great Will Rogers, kind of the Mark Twain, Benjamin Franklin rolled into one of the 20th century. Will Rogers was under contract with Fox, satirist, political commentator, humorist, very, very popular. Henry Fonda was in one of my very favorite old films by John Ford, Young Mr. Lincoln, part of the American trilogy that Ford made. Such a great film about the young aspiring lawyer Abraham Lincoln. Radio Keith Orpheum was famous for an unlikely combination of films that ranged from King Kong in 1933 to Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers musicals and Citizen Kane in 1941. The diverse array of films resulted because of numerous successions of different heads of production during the 30s and 40s. Though certain directors like John Ford and actors and actresses like Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, and Robert Mitchum worked for the studio at various times, mismanagement from studio heads like Howard Hughes hurt the studio. He was crazier than a bedbug. Radio Keith Orpheum lacked the thematic and stylistic consistency enjoyed by the other majors as a result, so they could never really figure out exactly who they were. They never really developed a style, so to speak. And you guys will see some RKO pictures in this class as we watch King Kong, Citizen Kane, Notorious, etc. And the beginning of their little logo, you'd hear, and that was kind of how they signed on and how you knew it was an RKO film. And they employed such great directors, arguably the greatest American director of all time, the great John Ford, who became famous for his movies with John Wayne. Katharine Hepburn, considered the single greatest female actress of all time by the American Film Institute. She and Humphrey Bogart, considered #1 male star by the AFI, would make a movie together called The African Queen. And there is Archibald Leach, Cary Grant, an English actor who had an accent that was just really hard to distinguish him. Cary Grant didn't exactly sound English, but he also didn't exactly sound American, somewhere mid-Atlantic. And he talked a lot like this. So when you talked to Cary Grant, you weren't exactly sure where he was from. It was just very hard to distinguish, are you English or are you American? There's Robert Mitchum, great RKO contract star, made one of my very favorite movies, Thunder Road, about bootlegging, but was also in one of my favorite westerns with John Wayne called El Dorado. Now on to the minors. Columbia earned a reputation for witty and urbane screenwriting and served as the home base for much of the Hollywood screwball comedy talent in Hollywood. Now, as a minor, they were forced to borrow stars like Clark Gable, Gary Cooper, Jimmy Stewart, and Cary Grant from other studios for Columbia in the 1930s. Harry Cohn, the studio chief, decided to build his own stable of stars in the 1940s, including William Holden, Rita Hayworth, Kim Novak, Judy Holliday, and Glenn Ford. So there's their famous logo, and most recently, while I was watching Zombieland 2, Columbia Pictures still uses this logo, and this gal takes her light torch and smashes a zombie with it at the beginning of the movie. So I told you these companies are still around, just a little bit differently than they used to be. So there's Gary Cooper, who will win an Academy Award for his portrayal of Sergeant York in the summer of 1941. Clark Gable was frequently loaned to Columbia Pictures out by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and who wouldn't want Clark Gable on their team for a while? Jimmy Stewart. Of all the movies in the American Film Institute's top 100, nobody is more represented than this man. The #3 actor, male actor of all time, according to the American Film Institute, Jimmy Stewart. Oh, and by the way, Cary Grant was #2. Jimmy Stewart, we'll be watching him in several movies in this class. I believe Kim Novak is the last of my Golden Age stars who's still alive here. She made one of my very favorite movies with Alfred Hitchcock, Vertigo, and was a Columbia contract star. There she is speaking with Hitchcock on the right, still alive. The Golden Age of Universal Pictures took place in the first half of the 1930s. Under the leadership of studio head Carl Laemmle Jr., the studio made innovative films like All Quiet on the Western Front and also launched a series of classic horror films stretching from Bela Lugosi's Dracula and Boris Karloff's Frankenstein to The Mummy in 1932, etc. Universal also boasted a series of emotionally restrained melodramas like Backstreet, which brought sophistication and elegance to the studio. Stars Rock Hudson and Doris Day brought both prestige and profits to the studio. Universal would become the Monster Studio. We'll be talking about why once we reach the 1930s shortly. And there is its iconic logo of the globe, a Universal picture. There's Carl Laemmle Jr., who was the studio head, the very first of the modern studios, Universal. And there's Bela Lugosi. My goodness, that is Dracula, folks. Don't come at me with all these other actors. That is Dracula. And when we get to 1931, you will see why. The best. Just like that man right there is Frankenstein. The best. Boris Karloff, another Universal contract star. And Doris Day, beautiful voice, one of Hitchcock's favorite actresses and blondes, had a golden voice to match her blonde hair. We recently lost her, but she was a very outspoken advocate for animals and animal rights. And the great Rock Hudson was also on contract with Universal. Poverty Row was a studio that was comprised of 8 studios, dominating a system that included a number of smaller studios like Republic, Monogram, etc. that sprouted up in the early 1930s to make B pictures to accompany the major studios' more expensively produced A picture on the bottom half of a double bill. The demand for cheaply made B-movies gave rise to other Poverty Row studios like Grand National, Producers Releasing Corporation, Eagle Lion, and Allied Artists. The most famous one of Poverty Row studios would probably be Republic Pictures. Well, folks, there you have it. Please make sure you complete the handout or the worksheet for this. I don't know what you call things on Canvas these days. And make sure you complete that and submit that to me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day and look forward to showing you our Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer studio tour.